You could start with the first one. All right. Once again, because I just love reminding all of us, including myself, our annual theme is Open at the Top. And today's lesson title is What If? Is a very good question. Now, I need you to know that I was out of town for Reverend Vicky's and John's previous lessons. And I created the lesson yesterday, my lesson yesterday, and ended up with a little extra time, and I had to tell John, oh my gosh, we were hand in glove. So if you want more, you can always go back to YouTube. So have you ever noticed how one good question can completely change your experience or perception? One good question. For many of you, if you were here or online for July 5th, we spent some time together visioning for America, using the spiritual practice of visioning. And then I had people share with each other based on the process and the questions that we asked, what was their vision for America? And I received lots of comments from people after that service. And I realized two things. That people felt uplifted and inspired by sharing their visions together. Sharing what they got out of the visioning exercise. And as John mentioned in meditation, we are naturally creative individuals. I had somebody who worked for me once who said, oh, I'm not very creative. And I said, are you kidding me? And she looked at me like, no. And I said, you are constantly doing the books. You are constantly solving problems. You are constantly connecting with people to resolve issues. All of that requires creativity. So it meant, as John said earlier today, broadening your definition of creativity. Are you creative with the stories you tell yourself? Oh boy, if you recognize them. Our forefathers visioned, didn't they? We, the people. And their vision has carried us into the nation that we are. Good, bad, ugly, beautiful, all of it. Their visioning carried an energy forward. And as those words reverberate and we understand the essence of what those words are, they carry forward into a common vision. So why did we stop visioning? In reading the news and social media, people are constantly rehearsing what? What are people constantly rehearsing in news and social media? Catastrophe? Opinions? How about judgment? Oh yeah, let's quickly jump to the judgment. And so they're willing to put their energy on the lack of, or what they're not seeing. But how about moving that energy into a question and asking, what if? What if we were to all consider having more conversations about what we vision? What if we used our imagination instead of worry, fear, judgment? We used our imaginations to consider what if. Now, this is not meant to replace your anger or replace your fear or disappointment or frustration. Those are just signals. Signals for you to become aware of, oh, I want something different. So what if plants seeds together about possibilities? What if we spent more time there? As I mentioned already, every mind is creative. And I know, again, John's lesson spoke to it. I know Reverend Michael is Mr. Wanderer. We've had that before. I know Reverend Connie has spoken about wondering. Questioning is important. That doesn't mean we've all mastered the technique of asking ourselves good and deeper questions. The quality of your life is often determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. If you never ask yourself questions, you never become aware of life's deeper meaning or how Spirit might be speaking to you on what your purpose is to express, either in this community or in any aspect of your life, in your family, in your jobs, in your relationships, in your expression of your relationship with your money, yes. Because if you don't ask questions, then you're not expanding the consciousness of abundance. And many of us, if we didn't, for instance, for the money question, if we weren't around people who talked about money, because of course we don't talk about money a lot amongst each other, right? There's a lot of secrets that we don't share about money. But your mind is creative, and there are many directions you can go in. You know, for us, sometimes we see things as a dot. There it is. That's what is. But really, there are many directions you can go, and that dot can become a sphere if you're willing to contemplate and ask questions. So there's all kinds of examples, and I'll use anger frequently as an example in the lesson today, but you can substitute that with fear, frustration, disappointment, pain. Fear may ask, what if everything falls apart? And creativity would say, what if everything comes together? I have a relative who constantly is worrying. Now, how much of what you worry about actually comes true? Very little. So why not be planting the seeds of possibilities? Anger asks, who is to blame? Again, that's what we see in the news and social media. But purpose could ask, what can this energy help me change? What is it asking of me? What do I want to see? How can I make movement that expresses more of who I am? Victimhood asks, as John's lesson talked about, why me? And vision says, what wants to emerge through me? Do you feel the energy shift in those questions? Being stuck in a corner or in that dot versus, let me ask some bigger, better questions. Worry may say, what if I'm not ready? And possibility may say, what if I grow as I go? I mean, isn't that what we're here for? We've been focusing on abundance. Scarcity says, what if there isn't enough? And abundance says, what if there is more than one way forward? If you're somebody who likes control, you may ask, how can I make this certain thing happen? I hear the giggles, so obviously people relate. And trust would say, what is mine to do next? Comparison asks, why do they have what I want? Again, you see that in a lot of social media. But inspiration would say, what does their life show me is possible for me? The past could ask, why did this happen to me? And wisdom can ask, what can I carry forward from this? And I know that that's not easy to do when you're in it. When you're in situations that are uncomfortable or painful, you're not perhaps ready to ask the question, what can I harvest from this? But the awareness is the first step. And so for our yearly theme, resignation asks, what's the point? I would like this one for voting. What's the point of voting, right? And vision says, what becomes possible if I stay open at the top? What becomes possible? So our power is in the question that we ask ourselves. And that's like exercising a muscle. So the question I'm going to constantly repeat today is, what if? What if you start imagining more what ifs in your life? You could say what if is one of the most powerful spiritual technologies we possess to open our minds and our hearts to a bigger picture. Now, if you imagine yourself, of course, I have a granddaughter. She's going to be, well, today, she's 7 months old. Wow. Happens fast, you all know. And did your grandchildren ever do this where they're picking things that are so small that it's like, how did you see that? And yet, there's a bigger picture. And even for us, an even bigger picture. We, as adults, get stuck in the form. But all things first come through mind. In other words, chairs can't be built until they're designed, and then they're built. Imagine someone saying to you, electricity ruined my life. What would you think about that? What's your first question? What were you doing with electricity? Now, I did study physics and some electronics because of computers and such, but, for an electrician, it's really important, is it not? That you make sure you have that electricity channeled correctly. You might ask, electricity in and of itself isn't good or bad. It's how we channel it. And of course, when things hurt us, we feel that that's bad because it doesn't feel good. But in paying attention, we can, like electricity, move the energy of how we're feeling into different thoughts, different questions. We can amplify the direction we want to give that energy just by paying attention. So Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, talked about, and I'll give you the quote in a few minutes, that our emotions work the same way as that electricity. Whether it's anger, fear, pain, it's not good or bad. It's a message for us to question. But we become habituated and react without pausing when we read that social media article or talk to somebody who triggers us. And the question is, are we strong enough and powerful enough to question what is that feeling and what is that message trying to tell me? So it's not the emotions that are our problem. It's simply looking at what that emotion is trying to show us. And that there are other possibilities. How can I see this differently? What if? What if this is happening ... We all know that the possibility for anger can be revenge. But what is that doing with the electricity? Comes back to you. And we may not see how it comes back to us, but when you put out that energy, it is a universal law, it's going to come back to you. So how are you willing to work to transition that energy? And use your vision on how to improve using that energy to improve the circumstance. And sometimes that simply means removing yourself from being in the painful situation. And sometimes that's difficult when it's a loved one. So it does mean asking the deeper questions, which sometimes we don't want to ask ourselves. We would rather sit in the, I'm mad at you. So Ernest Holmes' quote is, anger can be turned into love, and the very power that has been destroying can be used to build up. This is in the Science of Mind textbook, by the way. So I thought about that sentence. Anger can be turned into love. The truth is, you can't be angry if you don't really care about something. Is Karen here? That's an inside joke. But if you care about something, then that's probably when you get angry, because there's something there, there's a message there for you. And that, Dr. Ernest Holmes is telling us in this quote, he's not telling us not to feel that anger, to ignore it, to gloss over it, to do what we call spiritual bypass. Oh, I'll just think better. Hey, if it's there, it's gonna keep staying there until you process that. So Ernest Holmes is telling us, don't waste the energy. Use the energy by channeling it differently. Energy goes where attention flows. So again, there's the what if question. Can I move what's happening inside me, anger, pain, frustration, disappointment? Can I move that by asking questions? Because whether it's anger or pain, it's not trying to punish you. It's trying to wake you up. Sometimes we're not ready to wake up. That's okay. But what if anger isn't trying to punish you? What if fear isn't trying to predict your future, but simply ask you for your intention? And sometimes asking yourself, what do I want here, is a deep question. Will we take the time? That's a spiritual practice. Will we take the time to ask ourselves that question? And this is where self-care is really important. If you don't practice self-care, it's hard to ask yourself these questions. If you ignore your body, you ignore what's happening around you, whether that's in your money, in your relationships, well, the energy isn't going to go anywhere. But the what if question, when you're ready, allows you to move into leveraging the creative mind that you have. And I suspect, as I mentioned, that people liked visioning together and sharing their vision. I suspect that when we're all creative together, that feels good. That's just a natural expression of the truth of the creativity that is within us. And we feel more joyful when we can ask, what if, and think about, how would I like it to be? Like it goes to sleep. So anger clears the ground and vision plants the garden. Anger clears the ground. But cleaning the ground isn't enough. We want to create something of beauty, something of that we actually, as we create, we actually reflect back to ourselves, right? When we create something and see something that we've created, it comes back. It reflects back to us. Every garden begins with clearing the ground But no one wants to plant a garden just to admire the dirt. We want to plant seeds. Seeds for what we want to see in our life, and in the case of Visioning for America, what we want to see for the nation. So, the challenge is, this week you'll probably read something or talk to somebody that, again, disappoints you, causes some fear, causes some angst. Don't make that emotion your enemy, and don't make that emotion somebody else's problem. Take a breath and ask the most creative question that you can. Just try. Again, this is exercising a muscle. So your mind may not even ask many questions at first, like, Of course, many of you know I taught at the university, but we also homeschooled our children. And the thing I loved about homeschooling our children is they continued to ask questions. It wasn't this is what you have to learn because the California state standards say this is what teachers have to teach. It was like, let's follow your questions. So if you've been shut down a lot in your relationships or in being afraid of asking questions about money, then it is going to be a challenge to ask yourself more questions. That's the exercise. What can I ask of myself here? Again, there are unlimited possibilities. There are as many possibilities as there are people on earth, and we all know that we don't think the same, and so therefore the creativity of what we can all create together, unlimited possibilities. So when I'm with family members who want to argue politically, it's sort of like, what do we really want to see? Let's go back to the vision. You can argue about how that's supposed to be done, but I'm not sitting in a politician's chair to say exactly how that can be done. I think the original vision for America, and hence in conversing with ourselves, is to have the discussion. What are we visioning? We the people. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about how that helps us feel good? Life, liberty, justice. The one thing I want to say is a lot of times we want certainty going forward. But do we ever really have certainty in our life? Really? We're fooling ourselves. That's a story we tell ourselves. So I go back to Reverend Vicky's lesson about we're change makers. But do you like change? And maybe you can like change more by asking questions and seeing what you can create. So again, the future doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with imagination. A God-given skill, if you will, for everybody. It begins with imagination, and imagination begins with two simple words. What if? What if, no matter the circumstances, and again, I tend to move to those parts of our life that may not feel good, engaging, what do I want to call it? Forward momentum. We frequently get in ruts just because habits are easy. So then we can ask, what if this particular situation is inviting something better? What if? What would that be? I know that's work until it doesn't become work, right? So, whenever you catch yourself having the stories within, my challenge for you this week is to ask, what if? Because what if is really being open at the top. I am willing to ask what if. One more time. Now like you really mean it. Because that energy is what's going to make the difference. What if? Namaste. All right.